A poor student married a wealthy 70-year-old woman. However, a week later, he was shocked when she asked him. Kevin Johnson was only 22 years old, but it felt like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. A hard-working law student, he believed that only perseverance and dedication would help him build a better future. However, reality kept testing him over and over again. 3 years ago, the sudden death of his father shattered everything. A lightning-fast heart attack took away the man who had been the backbone of their family, leaving Kevin not only with the grief of loss, but also with an avalanche of responsibilities. Old debts, which no one had known about, began surfacing in the form of endless bills and threatening letters. Kevin became the head of the family, but he had no resources to support his sick mother and younger sister. His mother, Palmer, was battling cancer, which was draining not only her strength, but also the family's last savings. Kevin did everything he could to provide her with the necessary treatment, but the cost of medications, tests, and chemotherapy was unbearable. Meanwhile, his 14-year-old sister, Megan, despite the hardships, tried to smile and continued dreaming of becoming a veterinarian. Kevin hid the full horror of their situation from her, trying to shield her from reality. Kevin spent his nights sleepless, sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a mountain of unpaid bills. Each envelope was a reminder that he was losing the battle. He worked as an intern at a small law firm, but his salary barely covered the basics. Sometimes he wondered if he was truly doing everything possible. How could he save his mother, secure a future for his sister, and continue his studies at the same time? One day during an ordinary workday, his life took an unexpected turn. Kevin was at the office when one of the lawyers pulled him aside. "Kevin, you work a lot. I want to invite you to a social event this week. I think you need a break." The invitation seemed absurd to Kevin. He had neither the time nor the money, nor the right clothes to attend a high society event. But giving in to the lawyer's insistence, he agreed, thinking that perhaps it was an opportunity to make useful connections, something he had always heard was crucial for success in his profession. That evening, Kevin found himself in a completely different world. The mansion where the event was held was breathtaking. Sparkling chandeliers, classical music in the background, and elegantly dressed people. Kevin felt out of place but tried to blend in. He wandered through the hall, trying not to draw attention, until a woman approached him. Susan Broad was unlike anyone Kevin had ever met. At 71, she radiated confidence as if the entire world was in her hands. Her gaze was piercing, yet devoid of arrogance. "Young man, you're not from around here, are you?" Kevin hesitated but answered honestly. "No, ma'am, I'm here by chance." What started as a brief exchange turned into a conversation that lasted much longer than Kevin had anticipated. Susan was genuinely interested in his life, his family, and his dreams. Kevin, not even understanding why, opened up to her more than he had to any stranger before. When the evening came to an end, he said goodbye, unaware that this meeting would change his fate forever. In the following days, Kevin tried to return to his routine, but thoughts of Susan Broad kept surfacing in his mind. Her confidence, her attention, and her ability to see something in him beyond just a struggling student left an unforgettable impression. Meanwhile, at home, problems continued to pile up. His mother's condition worsened, and even Megan, despite trying to stay strong, started showing signs of worry. Kevin did his best to reassure his sister, but deep down, he knew he was at his breaking point. The debts kept growing, and the feeling of helplessness consumed him more and more. Then on an ordinary day, something unexpected happened. Kevin was in the small law office where he worked when he received a call. The voice on the other end was firm yet kind. "Kevin, this is Susan Broad. I hope you remember me." He was surprised but responded politely. "Of course I remember you, Susan Broad. How can I help you?" "Actually, Kevin, I think I can be of help to you. I'd like you to come to my home. I have something important to discuss with you." The call left him puzzled. What could Susan possibly want? Why would such a powerful and distant woman take an interest in a struggling student like him? Kevin considered ignoring the invitation, but thinking about his mother and sister, he realized he had nothing to lose. The next day, he arrived at Susan's mansion. In the daylight, the estate looked even more imposing. A housekeeper greeted him and led him to the living room. Susan was waiting in a comfortable chair, an expression of calm determination on her face. "Kevin, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing toward the chair opposite her. "Please sit down. We need to discuss something." Kevin obeyed, feeling the tension rising inside him. Susan didn't waste time on small talk. "I'll be direct. I see something special in you, Kevin. Strength, determination, honesty. Qualities that are rare these days. That's why I want to make you an offer." Kevin listened carefully, but nothing could have prepared him for what she said next. "I want to marry you." The words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Kevin blinked, trying to understand if he had heard correctly. "Susan Broad, with all due respect, what do you mean?" Susan smiled slightly. "I know it sounds strange, but hear me out. I'm not talking about love or romance. This is a contract. You need help, and I have my own reasons." Kevin didn't know how to react. Marrying a woman he barely knew? But thinking about his family and the burden he carried, he began to see a strange logic in her words. "Think about my offer, Kevin. Come back tomorrow with your decision," she said firmly. "But remember, sometimes the most unexpected opportunities change our lives forever." Her words echoed in Kevin's mind all night. He couldn't sleep, wondering how his life had come to this moment. "I want to marry you." It seemed unreal, but her offer promised something he couldn't ignore: a chance to save his family. The decision wasn't easy. Accepting meant giving up a normal life, facing judgment from others, and stepping into a role he didn't fully understand. But the image of his sick mother and his sister with her dreams helped him make up his mind. Kevin couldn't afford hesitation. The next morning he returned to the mansion, his heart heavy but his resolve firm. Susan met him in the living room, just as calm as before. "So, Kevin, have you considered my proposal?" she asked, her voice carrying an unspoken depth. "Yes, I have. And my answer is yes," he said, trying to sound confident. "But I need to understand. What do you expect from me?" She smiled slightly as if she had anticipated his response. "My expectations are simple. Mutual understanding. I don't ask for love or emotional attachment. I only need you to trust me and play your role." A chill ran down Kevin's spine. This woman, with her piercing gaze, was clearly hiding more than she let on. The wedding happened quickly. No grand celebration, no romance. Just signatures, a few witnesses, and an atmosphere of awkward formality. Kevin understood this was no ordinary marriage. It was a carefully planned agreement. After the wedding, Kevin's life changed dramatically. For the first time in years, he didn't have to worry about money. The debts were paid off, his mother received the best medical care, and Megan was enrolled in a private school. Kevin could finally breathe, yet something inside him remained unsettled. Susan, on the other hand, remained a mystery. She spent hours in her private study, writing letters and reviewing documents Kevin was not allowed to see. When they spent time together, she was polite but distant, as if avoiding any personal connection. One day, while walking through the mansion's corridors, Kevin noticed a slightly open door. Peeking inside, he saw Susan sitting at her desk, her hands trembling slightly as she held a sheet of paper. Quietly stepping back, Kevin made sure not to reveal his presence. But that image stayed with him. That evening, Susan called him for a conversation. She sat in the living room, a sealed envelope on the table in front of her. "Kevin, it's time for you to understand why I made this offer." Her voice was serious but calm. "Read this and everything will become clear." Kevin took the envelope and began to open it, but her words made him stop. "I want you to know that what's written here is only the beginning." He looked at her, confused and tense. "The beginning of what?" Susan didn't answer. She only looked at him with a gaze that mixed determination and sadness. Kevin held the envelope in his hands but hesitated before opening it. Her penetrating stare seemed so deep, as if she saw not only his actions, but also his thoughts. "Why don't you just explain?" he asked, trying to hide his mix of anxiety and irritation. Susan smiled slightly, with a touch of patience and melancholy. "Some truths need to be learned gradually, Kevin. Read it, and you'll understand." Kevin went to his room, where he finally opened the envelope. Inside, he found a handwritten letter and a document. Susan's confident handwriting filled the page with words that echoed in his mind as he read. "Kevin, if you're reading this, it means you have accepted not only my offer, but also the burden that comes with it. What I'm about to say may be difficult to understand, but I believe you will handle it. The letter continued, revealing a truth Kevin never expected. Susan was sick. Her diagnosis was terminal, and it had completely changed her outlook on life. She had no family, no heirs, no close people she could trust. Her decision to marry Kevin wasn't a whim, but a carefully thought-out choice. I chose you because I saw something I don't see in the people around me. Honesty. Despite all the hardships, you remain true to yourself. You are exactly the kind of person I want to pass my legacy to. Kevin felt the weight of these words pressing on his shoulders. He didn't know if he was ready for such responsibility, but he understood that Susan was right in her assessment. He had always fought, even when the whole world was against him. The document attached to the letter was unexpected. It was a power of attorney transferring control of a vast fortune to Kevin, along with the management of a charitable foundation Susan had been building throughout her life. When Kevin returned to the living room, Susan was waiting for him calmly. "So, have you read it?" she asked in an even tone. "I did, but I don't understand. Why would you trust me with something like this? We're practically strangers." Susan sighed, looking out the window, as if the answers lay on the horizon. "I saw in you what I never saw in those closest to me, honesty and compassion. My whole life, I was surrounded by people who only cared about what they could get from me. But you, Kevin, never asked for anything, yet you were willing to sacrifice everything for your family. And now? What do you want me to do?" Kevin asked, still trying to process everything he had learned. "I want you to use it for good. I'm not going to tell you how to live, Kevin. Just trust yourself and who you are." Only 7 days had passed since their wedding, and they had been a whirlwind. Now he faced a future he couldn't even imagine. Susan had given him not just wealth, but also a purpose. However, Kevin wasn't sure he was ready to accept it. It felt like he was living in a parallel reality. Everything he had known before had changed. Now he was the heir to an immense fortune and responsible for a legacy he barely understood. While Kevin tried to make sense of it all, Susan, in contrast, seemed surprisingly calm. She continued her usual routines, writing letters, reviewing documents, as if preparing for her departure. Meanwhile, Kevin felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. One evening, while they were in the library together, he finally asked the question that had been haunting him. "I still don't understand why you chose me. You could have trusted anyone, experts, advisors." Susan looked at him with a sad smile. "Because most people I've met in my life only care about themselves. I don't want this legacy to end up in the hands of those who see it merely as a means to accumulate power or wealth. I need someone who can do more. And you, Kevin, have something others don't. A heart that still believes in good and evil." Kevin remained silent, trying to absorb her words. He didn't know if he could live up to her trust, but he knew he had no right to let her down. As he spent more time with Susan, Kevin began learning more about her charitable foundation. She had dedicated years of her life to helping impoverished communities, funding educational projects, and supporting young people in difficult circumstances. She did it with immense passion, but admitted she had been disappointed by people who only sought personal gain. "That's why I stopped trusting people," she explained one day, "until I met you." Gradually, Kevin started taking part in the foundation's work, meeting people whose lives had been changed by Susan. He met young students who had received scholarships, families who had regained stability, and entire communities transformed by her efforts. For the first time, he began to understand the scale of what Susan had built. Despite the gratitude he saw around him, Kevin still had doubts. Could he carry this legacy? Was he strong enough to justify Susan's trust? In the last week of her life, Kevin spent more time with her. Their conversations became deeper and more personal. Susan spoke about her youth, her achievements, but also her regrets. She shared stories of choices made and not made, admitting that money had never brought her the happiness she had imagined. "In the end, the only thing that matters is the impact you leave on the lives you touch," she said one day. Her voice was weak but filled with conviction. On her final day, as she said goodbye, she took Kevin's hand and whispered, "Don't be afraid. You have everything you need to succeed." A few hours later, she passed away peacefully. The mansion felt different without Susan. The silence that once symbolized her calm and mysterious nature now felt empty and heavy. Kevin wandered through the halls trying to process the loss of the woman who had changed his life in such a short time. Despite everything Susan had left him, the fortune, the foundation, and most importantly, her belief in him, Kevin felt lost. He didn't know where to begin. The responsibility seemed too great for someone who, just weeks ago, was struggling to make ends meet. Sitting in his new luxurious living room, Kevin sorted through the documents Susan had prepared for him. Among them, he found another letter in her familiar handwriting, direct but warm. Kevin, if you're reading this, then this journey is now yours. I want you to know that I don't expect perfection. I only hope that you will do your best with what I've left you. Use this fortune to give hope to those who, like you, have felt the weight of the world on their shoulders. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes teach us too. These words deeply moved Kevin. He realized that even after her death, Susan remained his mentor. But despite that, he still doubted whether he had the right to take on such responsibility. In the following days, he focused on the foundation's work. He visited projects Susan had started and met people whose lives had been changed because of her. One young woman told Kevin that she had been able to finish medical school only because of the foundation's scholarship. She believed in me when no one else did, she said with tears in her eyes. These encounters deeply affected Kevin. He began to understand the true meaning of Susan's legacy. It wasn't about money, it was about what could be done with it to help others. Meanwhile, his mother, Palmer, was finally beginning to recover. The treatment was working, and she was growing stronger every day. Megan, in turn, had started attending one of the best schools in the city, something they had never even dreamed of before. Kevin felt immense relief seeing his family thrive, but he knew his journey wasn't over. One evening, while sitting in his office, he made a decision. Kevin picked up the phone and called the foundation's directors. I want to gather everyone. We have a lot of work to do. The next day, he presented his vision for the future of the organization. Kevin wanted to expand the foundation's activities, helping young people in difficult situations and creating new opportunities for those in need, just as Susan had once helped him. By the end of the meeting, Kevin felt something he hadn't in a long time: purpose. He realized that Susan had left him not just a legacy, but a new reason to live. Now, he wasn't just carrying her name, he was building something that would change lives, starting with his own. Under Kevin's leadership, the foundation began to grow, exceeding its original expectations. He invested in educational projects, medical assistance, and programs for talented young people in need of support. For the first time, Kevin felt that his life was no longer just about survival. It had taken on a deeper meaning. Every day was a new battle, but also a new victory. Kevin worked tirelessly to ensure that every initiative honored Susan's memory. However, despite all the progress, he often wondered if he truly lived up to the trust she had placed in him. One of the most significant moments came during a ceremony organized by one of the foundation's first scholarship recipients. A young doctor, who had completed his education thanks to Susan's support, shared in his speech how the foundation had not only saved his career, but also his mother's life when she needed urgent medical treatment. His words served as a powerful reminder to Kevin that Susan's legacy lived on in every life that had been saved. If it weren't for this support, I wouldn't be standing here today, saving lives. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to the memory of Susan Broad, who believed in me when no one else did. The speech moved everyone in attendance, but Kevin felt something even deeper. He realized that he carried not just responsibility on his shoulders, but also the real impact of his decisions. For the first time, the doubts that had haunted him all his life began to fade. As the foundation continued to thrive, Kevin started dedicating more time to his family. His mother, Palmer, had fully recovered and often reminded him of how much he had changed their fate. Megan, in turn, was excelling in school and had already started making plans to study veterinary medicine. You did it, Kevin. You fulfilled everything you once promised, Palmer said during a quiet conversation in the kitchen. I didn't do it alone, Mom, he replied, squeezing her hands. Susan gave me a chance, but my strength has always come from you. Despite all his accomplishments, Kevin never forgot the woman who had made it all possible. He dedicated a special room in the foundation's building to Susan's memory, displaying her photos, letters, and excerpts from her speeches. It was his way of preserving her legacy and inspiring others. On a winter day, Kevin was invited to a special event, the opening of a vocational school funded by the foundation. He was welcomed with applause and inspiring speeches, but the most memorable moment came when he was asked to speak. When I started this journey, I didn't know if I was ready. There were more doubts than certainty, more fear than courage. But one person believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Today, I see that her faith was justified, and I promise to continue honoring this legacy. As he spoke, Kevin noticed tears in the eyes of many in the audience. He realized that Susan's message, once passed on to him, was now reaching others. Her impact wasn't just lasting, it had become eternal. The room erupted in applause. Standing before the audience, Kevin felt a mix of emotions too powerful to contain. Every face in the crowd carried its own story, now intertwined with his own. Young graduates, smiling mothers, carefree children playing, all of them were living proof of Susan Broad's influence and the work Kevin had committed to carrying forward. When the event ended, Kevin stayed on the stage for a few moments, gazing at the foundation's banners bearing Susan's name. He couldn't help but smile sadly, remembering the woman who had changed his life in such a short time. That night, when he returned home, he found Palmer and Megan waiting for him in the living room. It was a simple scene, but it carried deep meaning. His mother was healthy, his sister was full of energy and dreams. Everything he had fought so hard to protect remained intact. "How was the event?" Palmer asked, handing him a cup of tea. Kevin smiled as he held the cup in his hands. "It was incredible, Mom, but more importantly, it reminded me that everything was worth it." Megan, sitting beside him, looked at him with admiration. "I always knew you would succeed," she said, her eyes shining. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of rain tapping against the window. The soft rhythm of the raindrops created a warm and cozy atmosphere in the house. Kevin stood up and walked to the window, watching as the raindrops trickled down the glass. He thought about Susan, about her words, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Later that night, he visited Susan's memorial room at the foundation. The quiet space was illuminated by soft light filtering through the windows. Kevin approached a display case where one of her last letters rested. He read the words that had always inspired him. "It's not about how much time you have, Kevin. What matters is what you do with it. The mark you leave on others' lives defines who you are. Trust yourself." Kevin's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were of gratitude, pride, and the certainty that he was on the right path. As he stepped out of the room, he met a group of young foundation scholars. One of them called out to him, "Kevin, thank you for everything. You changed my life." Kevin paused, looked at him, and smiled sincerely. "It wasn't me. It was all Susan." When he stepped outside, the sky was clear, and the sun shone brightly. Kevin looked into the distance, knowing that a new chapter was beginning. He understood that this journey would never truly end, because what Susan had given him and what he was now passing on to others was more than just a legacy. It was a fire that would keep burning, spreading from one person to another, changing lives forever. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, Susan, for everything." Then with steady steps, Kevin continued forward, ready to change the world. One good deed is contagious. Did you enjoy this story? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, make sure to do so and become part of this amazing community. And don't forget to check out the other content we prepared for you with love. See you in the next video.